Hey, welcome back to Snowflap, the podcast from SnowTrax television. And we're back at it again this week with another hopefully insightful and thought-provoking message for you. We're going to talk about something completely different than what we have been talking about. And we've been sort of not stuck, but we've done quite a bit of Polaris stuff and stuff that's Polaris-centric. This one's just going to be called Yamaha. And I hope to bring to you for those of you who may not know some stories, and some of you may actually have heard the stories but forgotten, and I'll tweak your interest in hearing it again. Just want to thank you all for the likes and comments and all of the nice things that you've been saying in the comments. And you don't have to say nice things, but it's a little better than ticking me off. But in any case, we appreciate the comments. I follow up those that I think I'm going to help with and give some insight to. And we read them all for sure. So we appreciate that. So let's jump in here and talk about Yamaha's exit from the snowmobile business. Thus far, this exit from the snowmobile business has been explained maybe a little bit ambiguously. I mean, there'll probably be some people who say, no, I understand completely what's going on. Good, stick with us. Maybe there's something else we can tell you. But the truth of the matter is that this goes back a long ways, and you're going to maybe find this a little strange. But this whole exit that happened in the last year and a half, actually started at the entrance of Yamaha into the four-stroke snowmobile business with the 2003 RX-1 four-cylinder, four-stroke snowmobile. And so that's how far back, in my opinion, things go to where you can see that there might be an emerging issue. Frankly, we all know how this story ends because we're all witnesses to it. But what you may not know is how it began. And that's why we're going to talk about 2003 first. The demise, I think, of Yamaha's snowmobile business occurred at the same time, or began at the same time as the RX-1's introduction. And I know that sounds sort of salacious, but in my opinion, there's a lot of evidence to point us in that direction. At that introduction in 2003, Yamaha made it clear that in the future, their development money, their development investments, their technology was all going to be four-stroke centric, and that they were going full speed ahead into the four-stroke snowmobile business. Honestly, I don't want to tell you that I think I can discern what an OE is thinking about, because I can't. But after years of experience and been there and done that and got a t-shirt and seen so many things, sort of like history repeating itself, I got to tell you, at that intro of the RX-1, and it was a big deal, it was a lot of fanfare, I had an uneasy feeling. I just didn't feel that the proclamation that Yamaha would go ahead and do nothing but four strokes was a viable proclamation in terms of the way the industry is, the way the snowmobile business is, and what it looks like. Actually, Yamaha's proclamation at that RX-1 introduction was not unlike their proclamation years earlier that their marine business, their outboard engine business, was going to go 100% four-stroke, and it did. And I can tell you from what I know, we're not in the marine business, but I can tell you from what I know, it has been hugely successful. I mean, Yamaha sells, I don't know what the number is, but it's a big number of outboard motors around the world, and virtually all of them now are four-stroke. And so you've got to kind of picture in your mind, you've got these voices here in Hamamatsu, Japan, in the marine division, and these guys over here listening in the snowmobile division. They're saying, we went full tilt, four-stroke, and look at what's happened. You know, it's been a huge success. And I think that in some way, shape, or form, that may have had some motivation and helped give some motivation to keep pushing for four-stroke power in snowmobiles. Nevertheless, I didn't buy that proclamation, and for snowmobiles, that they would ultimately equal the marine business that Yamaha occupies, the amount of market share they occupy. It would not equal that, and I was concerned. What I felt was, and a number of people I know who are insightful felt the same thing, was that Yamaha would be precluding themselves from some pretty important markets with only offering 4-strokes. And I mean, you know, once again, here we go, but it comes down to weight. It comes down to markets where performance is measured in weight, and they would not be able to compete there, in my opinion, at this time. And that's what held true and happened as time went on over the next 20 years. In the snowmobile business, it appears, as time has rolled on, is that there's a spot for both 4-stroke and 2-stroke power. The interesting thing is to get that right, is to get the right blend and the right models and the right segments using the right power. There's another twist in the road too that happened in the 00s, and that is Skidoo's launch of the Rev with the rider forward ergos. And I mean, it took the market by storm. You know that when it came out in 03. And by the time that Yamaha got to model year 06, they had to do serious retooling of the RX-1 to give it a rider forward ergonomic package. And that was a pretty short run for the RX-1. In the snowmobile business, most of the OEs like to get 4 to 5 years out of a platform, usually no more than that. And then in that 4 to 5 years, there will be updates, there'll be new features and whiz-bang stuff. But basically, so they're not shifting the whole platform every other year. It's usually 4 to 5 years. This was a lot shorter than that, and they had to do it because the Rev was taken off. And like you needed, you know, binoculars to see it on the horizon, how big its sails were and how far it had gotten ahead of the competition. So they rejiggered the ergos of the RX-1, and honestly, it was a remarkable job. They did a great job. The sled was fully rider forward, really comfortable, and they did the same thing after the Vector had been in the market, I think just a year. They did the same kind of rejiggering of the ergos to get the rider forward. And of course, you know, as history is written, we know that Polaris was on a mission to do the same, and so was Arctic Cat, to get the rider forward as fast as possible. So time marched on in the latter part of the 00 decade, and Yamaha was pushing their 4-stroke product and de-emphasizing their 2-stroke product, and that is a matter of record. But here's what happened in 2008. Yamaha designed a completely new chassis with a new front and rear suspension, and a new, at that time to the Yamaha fleet, it had just been used in the Vector, but a new Genesis 3-cylinder 4-stroke motor that was a piece, and still is a piece of art. It is I could never say a bad thing about a 1049 Genesis Yamaha, and it's still used to this day. They use it in some marine applications, watercraft, I believe. But that motor and then that chassis was represented, trust me on this, millions of dollars. That was a complete retooling. There was nothing in what they built so far in terms of chassis, suspension, skid, the whole 9 yards, nothing that would transfer over to what became known as the Nitro. So that introduction of the Nitro in 2008 was a big deal for Yamaha, and Yamaha was not oblivious to the fact that they were going to have light snowmobiles, particularly in the trail performance categories, which is where, and crossover, which is where the Nitro entered in and where it was positioned. And so they knew that they needed to have lightweight to be credible there. And absolutely, the magic elixir was lightweight. And so they talked about it a lot. And at the sneak peek intro of the Nitro, it was made clear that this is going to set a new standard for lightweight in the snowmobile business. Okay, so here's another story for you. Fast forward to heydays that year, 2008 model year, And it was the last year, I believe, that we were at Forest Lake at the original Heyday site. And, then we moved up the highway, of course, a half an hour, whatever it is. So when you walked in the front gate of Heyday's that year, boom, where they always are, there's the ginormous Skidoo tent. But something was different. On the walkway going up and into the tent on either side of the walkway is a new 1200cc MXZ 4-stroke, 3-cylinder 4-stroke, hanging on an electronic scale. On the other side of the walkway is a brand new Nitro 1049 121-inch hanging on an electronic scale. And the numbers were big and large for everybody to see. And guess what? The XR, which is what they called the 4-stroke Skidoo did, their XR base 1200 was considerably lighter, certainly frustratingly lighter for Yamaha than the Nitro. And so the Nitro hadn't even gotten to the market yet, and Skidoo has responded or was leading the way, one or the other. I mean, they're a tremendously resourceful company. And honestly, I felt bad for Yamaha because I know that they had put their heart and soul into that Nitro platform, that they wanted to occupy that space and be the 4-stroke leaders. And one of the ways to be a 4-stroke leader, obviously, was going to be to bring a genuine trail sled with 2-stroke-ish weight, certainly lightweight. And I think there's a big lesson here. No, I don't think it. I know there's a big lesson here because I've seen it happen over and over and over again. Skidoo had no intention of letting Yamaha mow their grass. None. They went into this thing with guns blazing and with a plan, and that they were going to occupy lightest 4-stroke sled. Now you can remember this kind of comes on the heels of the XP 2-strokes that were introduced that were 50 pounds lighter than the Gen 1 Rev. And so, yeah, they just continued on with that in just crazy weight reduction program and applied it to the 4-stroke, to the 1200. Boom, there you are. And so the sizzle pretty quickly came off the Nitro steak at that Heyday's intro. And it was definitely perceived as, and I believe intended as, an in-your-face kind of move. Because of the consequences of what happened at Heyday's and what subsequently happened in the sales season in the fall of that year, I think that may be the time when Yamaha started to ask some serious questions about their continued investment and pushing forward of 4-stroke product. Now, they did introduce the Phaser 500, which was 250 YFC, two 250 YFC motors kind of fused together as an absolute mechanical work of art. But it did not enjoy great sales success because it was priced really high, and it had to be because it had such a sophisticated motor. But the Nitro and that Phaser are the last of the Yamaha Hamamatsu built 4-stroke snowmobiles. From there on in terms of new product, it was just variants and different packages that they put together with the stuff that they had. So the story gets, it gets fairly deep now because there's been a number of issues that would have been driving Yamaha, looking over their shoulder, seeing the Marine division having nothing but success with 4-stroke power, and they were not having great success up until this point. In late January 2012, we attended the annual Minneapolis sneak peek event for the media, and it wasn't on snow. It was every year we would go to the Minneapolis convention centers at the airport hotels, and the 4 OEs would set up on carpet all their stuff, so we got to see it before we went to Yellowstone to ride it. And that way, those of us who at that time were in the magazine business were able to produce a magazine and get it out basically right when we were at Snowshoot. So that's the logistics behind that. Nonetheless, this was a very different, very different sneak peek intro. The scuttle was like you could feel it, you could hear it, that there was something going on. And you've got You've got all four OEs on the ground within a couple of miles of each other, and they're pulling the sheets off of all their new models. And they pull the sheets, Yamaha pulls the sheets off of their sleds, and lo and behold, you've got a number of models that are obviously Arctic Cat Procross snowmobiles with Yamaha power in them, Yamaha engines in them. There's a few subtle things. The clutches were Yamaha, the jack shaft was Yamaha, but pretty much everything else, tub, tunnel, skid, A-arms, front end, all of that was all Arctic Cat stuff. Now, it was a pretty shocking moment, I think, for everybody, because we weren't expecting, you might expect one model or two models, but the whole four-stroke paradigm now is being shoved into an Arctic Cat platform, the Yamaha four-stroke paradigm, I mean. And yeah, it was pretty shocking to see what happened. The Japanese-built Yamahas decreased in the brochure, and the Arctic Cat adapted Yamahas continued to expand. So pretty clearly, something was going on, something was brewing at Yamaha. And once again, sorry, I can't predict the future, but I had an uneasy feeling in my stomach really, really bad at this intro in Minneapolis, because to me, there was no new pure Yamaha chassis motor combination. There was no new product, no talk about any new product being built by Yamaha. In fact, a lot of the whispering was, well, I guess basically Yamaha is just going to be making motors. And interestingly enough, Yamaha calls themselves a motor company. They are first and foremost a motor company, not an outboard company, not a motorcycle company, not a scooter company, certainly not a snowmobile company. They are a motor company, and that is their expertise. And they make some awfully impressive motors. And of course, all of those market areas, marine and motorcycle and all those things, they are very important, and they make great outboard motors and they make great motorcycles. But the crux of the matter is that they call themselves a motor company, a motor manufacturing company. So what you saw sitting on the ground was Yamaha motors in domestic Arctic Cat chassis. What really had happened was that Yamaha had scaled back their domestically built snowmobile product to the point where they could make a very easy exit if this didn't work. In other words, if the reinvigorating of the product line with all the new Arctic Cat built Yamahas, notice how I didn't say Yamakats. I really don't like that. Yamaha was in a situation where they could quite easily exit the snowmobile business and still keep supplying engines to Arctic Cat, because Arctic Cat, for every Yamaha Arctic Cat with the Yamaha motor and an Arctic Cat chassis, there was also a corresponding Arctic Cat with a Yamaha motor in it as well. Gets a little confusing, but don't get me wrong here, okay? This isn't about anything being wrong with the Yamaha sleds being built by Arctic. This isn't about that. They turned out to be good snowmobiles. They're still running around. You see them all the time. There's a lot of guys who are faithful Yamaha guys, bought them and loved them and still have them. What this is about, clearly, definitively, is that there just wasn't, in the state of the current snowmobile marketplace at that time, there wasn't enough sales volume for four strokes solely in a company's product lineup. There just wasn't enough volume. I think that Yamaha may have felt, because they announced their deliberate intention to go all four-stroke, that they would be able to look at the whole marketplace and say, well, come on over here and buy a Yamaha. We're the four-stroke company. It doesn't work that way, or it didn't work that way, because people are fiercely brand loyal and identify with their brand. And so there just wasn't enough sales volume to make a real assault on the snowmobile marketplace. There just wasn't the volume there. So even though industry sales numbers, you know this or not, but they're held pretty close to the vest of the OEs. You can get them from time to time. While this was going on in the 20-teens, Skidoo was slaying the snowmobile market and expanding their market share. This is another interesting story. From the arrival of the original Rev in 03 to the 20-teens, Skidoo had gobbled up the marketplace. I mean, literally, like voraciously. Their market share was rumored to be, okay, it was at least 50%. But I talked to people who are in the know, and they said it is almost 60% at one point in time in the 20-teens. And that market share came from a mixture of 4-stroke and 2-stroke powered snowmobiles. Not just one, not just 2 strokes, not just 4 strokes, but a blend of those products together. And they kept pushing the ball forward, improving their product every year with substantial investments that, well, those investments can be made when you've got a 50% market share, because you're killing the market. I mean, you got to realize Polaris probably had 20 or just under or just over 20%. So let's say Skidoo had 60, there's 80, that leaves 20 left for Yamaha and Arctic Cat. That's not great. At this point in history, the company seemed to have very little interest in making snowmobiles in Japan in the Hamamatsu plant. One of the things you have to understand about the economies of scale, Yamaha makes tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of all kinds of motors and vehicles that they put them in. The number of snowmobiles that they were selling, that they were bringing in to North America, to the North American market, was, honestly, there was no way that could have been profitable for them. It just wasn't enough volume, and they weren't getting there making them themselves. So they've moved the game around a bit and have Arctic Cat making them, so that their investment in the snowmobile business is less. Hopefully their profitability is more, I would imagine. I don't know that. That sounds like something that was on the agenda for a meeting of senior management in Hamamatsu. So with the interest level, from what we could see, the interest level kind of waning in terms of building 4-stroke snowmobiles in Japan, and certainly continuing to build them in North America. So with the way the plan was working, they were able to build and sell, or have built and sold Yamaha snowmobiles and satisfied their dealer network. And it actually kept an opportunity or a door open, as I said earlier, for them to be in the snowmobile marketplace, and if nothing else, sell engines to Arctic Cat. So running counter to all this is an interesting story about the Apex. The Apex was much beloved in the minds and hearts of a legion of Yama groupies, and you know who you are. And for good reason. That was a great snowmobile, and there's actually stories of consumers, Yamaha consumers, when Yamaha announced this would be the last year for the Apex. There's actually stories of people buying two, guys bringing one home in a crate, leaving it sit in the corner of the garage, and riding the other one for 3 or 5 years or whatever, how many miles they wanted to put on it. And then they just start over again and put the new one together and ride it. I mean, I know it sounds crazy, but it is verifiably true that this had happened. And there was a lot of support for the Apex. The Apex was really like the #1 best thought of Yamaha 4-stroke snowmobile, hands down, running away. It just was a great sled. And in the years when they had the Apex using a single shock skid frame with an Olin shock in the skid, with a compression adjuster on the tunnel, that model, that sled, was amazing. It was every bit as good riding as an R-Motion Skidoo. And those sleds, you could reach down where your ankle is on your boot on the running board, and countersunk into the side of the tunnel is a dial that you click the compression and damping up and down, which could somebody please do that on our sleds now instead of having to lay down in the snow and reach into the back and fiddle around with compression clickers? I mean, it was slick. It was a great idea. Unfortunately, it was only 2 or maybe 3 at the most model years that Yamaha used that Olin skid, and they, you know, in retrospect, I'm sure they wish that they had continued to use it, because it was really heralded as something, well, as a trail weapon. An Apex was a formidable trail sled, great sled, and of course had that 4-cylinder, super smooth. I mean, without any doubt, it was like a hot knife through butter, and just sounded great, and of course it was a Yamaha. It was super reliable. So that's the story on Yamaha, and I feel I feel a very tangible measure of sadness that we're going to go on without Yamaha, and that's a sad statement, because they were important. They were important to the industry. They were important to a legion of dealers. I mean, there's many dealers who were not able to stay in the snowmobile business because the market they're in, all the brands were taken. There was dealers already for them. So when Yamaha shuttered their business, they ended up not being able to be in the business. And you know, snowmobile dealers are super important in our volunteer-driven business. We need snowmobile dealers to help with loaning a chainsaw or a side-by-side or something to a club, or helping with a draw or a raffle or an OE to provide a snowmobile to be auctioned off for a state or provincial organization. Those kind of things we need with our volunteer base the way we are. We need 4 OEs, but we're going to go ahead with this, and the way it sits right now, it's another chapter in the history of the snowmobile business that we've all been witness to. So I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope there was something insightful for you here that tweaked your sensibilities. And we're going to look forward to seeing you again next week for our 5th installment of Snow Flap, brought to you by SnowTrax Television.